guys, welcome back to another book review video. Today we're doing my May monthly recap video where I'm going to be going through the books that I read during the month of May and my reviews on them and my ratings. So let's get into it. The first book I read in May was The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. Now, I had really high hopes going into reading this book. I mean, obviously it's a beautiful book, and I've heard so many 5-star reviews of this book, but I honestly found it a little bit hard to get through. Like, I guess used to I had just finished, reading all of Sarah J Maas's books, and I guess going from something that's super high fantasy like that to something like this, which, don't get me wrong, this was still really good. I just found the writing style to be very basic in comparison to what I had been previously reading. So it just seemed a little bit, not juvenile, it just seemed a little bit boring in comparison, but I still pushed through. So it did take me a little bit of time to get into reading this book. I knew the story already, so I already kind of knew what was going to happen, so I didn't really feel like it had that big of an emotional impact on me like it did for others who might not have known the story. But I still thoroughly enjoyed it. I definitely enjoyed it probably from about halfway through to the end. I definitely enjoyed it a lot more and read that a lot more quickly. But I was still kind of expecting more from this book. I still enjoyed it, but just wasn't really it didn't really live up to the expectations I had of it. So I gave it a 3.5 out of 5 for The Song of Achilles. The next book I read was Guild, which is the first book in a 4-book series that is an incomplete series. There is a 5th book coming out soon. This is by Raven Kennedy. Also, I had heard great things about this book and I thoroughly enjoyed the first book. It's definitely a romance fantasy where I feel like the romantic plot is more important than the subplot. Like, everything else is kind of a subplot and the romance is the main sort of thing. Normally I prefer the plot to be the main sort of thing and the romance to be a second sort of subplot, but this was still a very nice book to read. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I liked the main love interest, I liked the main character, and I liked the concept of the story. I gave this book a 4 out of 5 stars. It wasn't 5 stars for me. I do find the writer's writing style to be a little bit repetitive, and I think she rambles on a little bit, but the first book was really, really good. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Next up was Glint, which is book number 2. In the Guild series. Again, I really enjoyed this book. We were introduced to new characters, and I really liked the side characters that we were introduced to in this book, and I felt like there was still plot to this book. Like, it was still moving forward in a way that I could still enjoy it. It didn't go in the direction that I thought it was going to go into, which is why I also thoroughly liked it. And I also gave this a 4 out of 5. Now, here's where things start to get a little bit downhill for the Guild series for me. Book number 3, Gleam, and this is a big book. Like, this is not a small book. I felt that this book was so freaking repetitive, and this could have been half the size that it is because the author just kept rambling. She does this thing where, with the main character or whoever's point of view it is that you're reading, she does this thing where, like, the person is thinking all this internal dialogue and they're thinking about all these life lessons and things like that and overcoming all these things, which is great. But there's just so much of it, and I feel like, you'll have a whole page of internal dialogue in this character's mind, that's self-righteous, or they're trying to hype themselves up, or that's, they're overcoming things, and it's like the author's trying to teach you a life lesson, which is great, but it just goes on and on and on, and I feel like she makes the same point over and over and over again, just using bigger or different words in a different order. And if I really wanted to read a book about personal development, I would read a personal development book. Like, that's not what I want from this. I want plot. Like, I want to know what's happening. Like, okay, can we get on with it and get to what's happening in the plot now? So I felt like this book was a really big letdown for me. I rated this a 3 out of 5. Like, it's still not bad. I still read it and I still enjoyed parts of it. It just went on forever. And the downhill train continued when we got to Glow, which is the 4th book in the Guild series. Same thing as the 3rd book. It goes on for fucking ever. This book is so long, and I feel like this much of the book is just all her internal dialogue, and the plot doesn't move forward. There's nothing going on. But then everything happens in the last sort of like this much of the last book. Everything happens so fast, and the plot is just glossed over, and all of these things go wrong, and it's all like 1-chapter scenes of all these things going wrong. We've spent like 20 chapters with nothing happening at all. It was a really big letdown for me, and I really got disappointed in the main male character in this book. I just felt like his character development was so good up until this book, and I just didn't really like him anymore. So this was a 3 out of 5, and that's being generous. I probably would give it a 2.5 out of 5, just because I was so disappointed. I thought it was such a bad ending. I know it's not an ending. I know there's a 5th book coming out, but I don't even know if I'm going to read the 5th book because this book was just so disappointing to me. Now, getting back to some good book reviews, the next book is probably my favorite book that I've read all year. Like, all year. Actually, it's probably one of my favorite books I've ever read in my entire life. And that is Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. Oh my goodness, when I say this is a good book. Right off the bat, I fucking was so invested. Like, I wanted to know what happened next. It piqued my interest straight away. And shit just happened. Like, you know what I was just talking about in the previous books that I read where it was so slow and took so long to move the plot forward? This fucking moved forward so quickly and I was so invested. I love the side characters. I love the main female character. I think she's got a fantastic personality and there's so much room for character development in the coming books because this is going to be a 5-book series. And the main male character, I think he's my new favorite main male character of any series I've ever read, like including all of Sarah J Maas's main male characters. I think Xaden is the best one. I am a Xaden worshipper now. I love him. But I gave this book 5 stars. It's got everything I could want in a fantasy book. It's got dragons, it's fantasy, it's got amazing side characters, amazing main characters. There's conflict, there's resolution. There are sex scenes, like yes, it does have smutty sex scenes, but it's slow burn, which is what I like. I don't want every chapter to be a sex scene. I like plot, and there was so much plot leading up to that. And when you do get to the sex scenes, they were so slow burn that you were so ready for it to happen. This book was perfect. I don't think I could have changed anything about this book. This was a 5 out of 5 read for me. I fucking loved it and I cannot wait to read the next ones in the series. The final book that I read in May was probably my worst book of the year, which is funny. So I just had my best book of the year and I followed it up with my worst book of the year that I really, really struggled to finish. And that was Godkiller by, what was this? Hannah, I think you say her name. Oh my God, talk about a snooze fest. I know some people would probably enjoy this book, but it was just so boring. Like, it was so slow. It was so hard for me to get into. I didn't like the main female character. I don't really like any of the side characters either. And I just felt like nothing happened. Like, yes, there was stuff on the ending, but this took me 2 weeks to read. All my other books, I read, 6 books. I read all 6 other books in 2 weeks, in the first 2 weeks of May. This took me 2 weeks to get through because it was so boring. And no offense, if you like this book, that's fantastic, but this is just not for me. I just could not relate to any of the characters and I actually really regret reading it, but I am the type of person that I have to finish a book. If I start a book, I can't DNF it. DNF means do not finish. I can't not finish it because I need to see it through to the end. I forced my way through finishing this book and that is 2 weeks of my life of reading that I'll never get back. This was a 1.5 out of 5 for me, and that's being generous. I really did not like this book at all. So there you have it. Those are my May reads. And some of my best book of the year and my worst book of the year and some disappointing books in there as well. It wasn't really a great month of reading. I read 7 books because that last book just took me so long to finish, but that's okay, we move on. But yeah, those are my reviews of the 7 books that I read in May. If you want to pick any of them up, feel free to. I would highly recommend, if you are a big fantasy reader, that you go pick up Fourth Wing and you read the shit out of that because that is my best book of the year so far. But I hope you enjoyed my video and I'll see you guys for next month's recap.